evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. CDC mask policy faces heavy backlash from Republican governors and lawmakers. California's already picked it up, but other states aren't buying it. Additional ports of entry opening up to receive thousands of migrants crossing the Rio Grande River. This while border officers are releasing COVID-positive illegal immigrants into the U.S. Key negotiating senators, both Democrats and Republicans, have reached a deal on a hard infrastructure plan. Debate on the floor could start as early as tonight, with some senators warning of inflation. President Biden wants to support American manufacturing. He says he has a plan to raise the standard for products to earn the classification Made in USA. And we have an update on the chemical leak at the facility near La Porte, Texas. 2 people have died and dozens were injured. The CDC is recommending everyone wear masks indoors if they're in areas with substantial to high levels of infection. It doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not. But they're getting a lot of backlash from governors and lawmakers, calling the CDC an inconsistent and discredited agency. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more.
Republican Senator Ted Cruz says the CDC is playing politics, referring to their updated policy on masks. This policy recommends that everyone, vaccinated or not, wear a mask indoors in areas with substantial to high levels of infection.
I think the decision yesterday by the CDC is the kind of decision that is infuriating people across this country. I believe the CDC's decision yesterday was politics. It wasn't science. It was a decision that somehow pretends vaccines don't work.
The policy's also drawing backlash from Republican governors like Kristi Noem. In a tweet, the CDC shifts their position again. If you're worried about the virus, you're free to get vaccinated, wear a mask, and stay home. But we won't be mandating anything.
Nothing changed about the science.
Dr. Anthony Fauci defended the CDC's reversal, saying it was their response to a more contagious variant.
We were dealing with the alpha virus back a few months ago. As I told you, it was a virus that if a person had a breakthrough infection, very, very unlikely that that person would transmit it. That's changed. Now, the level of virus in the nasopharynx of an infected person with Delta is 1,000 times of what it was with the Alpha.
It now sounds like they're planning to keep our children masked indefinitely with no end in sight.
Sharon McKeeman is the founder of Let Them Breathe, an organization comprised of parents advocating for mask choice for youth.
Now, this applies to everyone, vaccinated or not, including children. Some are calling this unrealistic and unscientific. Would you agree with these critics?
Yes, we absolutely agree that the CDC and California Department of Health, where I'm here in California, are not following the science. We know that our kids are at low risk from COVID. The science shows that they're not super spreaders. And those who are at high risk have had that choice to be vaccinated or not. So the other part of this is that as parents, we have been seeing the mental health impacts. We've been seeing our kids suffering behind these masks, anxiety, depression, drug use, even suicidal ideations are things that our kids are struggling with, and they're telling us it's directly linked to the isolation, the school closures, and the restrictions such as masking. And we know that our kids are at high risk from that. So really the science and the data is backing up what we're saying as parents, which is that our kids need to be able to have that choice to share their smiles, breathe freely, and engage in their education in a way that's effective, where they can communicate with their teachers and their peers.
California requires K-12 students and adults to wear masks in public indoor places, a decision they based on the CDC's guidelines. McKeeman is suing the state, challenging the mask mandate. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky now says vaccine passes, otherwise known as vaccine passports, may very well be the path forward. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
And this just in, a CDC spokesperson has told the Epoch Times that the studies that prompted the CDC to change their mask guidance for vaccinated people are not available because they're not yet published. And this week, the Department of Justice said in an opinion that emergency use authorization vaccines can be mandated by public or private entities. But bioethicist Dr. Robert Malone, who invented mRNA vaccine technology, says the legality of the issue isn't settled and expects it will end up in the Supreme Court. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
Bioethicist and inventor of mRNA vaccine technology, Dr. Robert Malone, has spent his entire career developing vaccines and vaccine technology and has been rigorously trained in vaccine safety and ethics. He tells NTD that he believes the Justice Department declaring that emergency use authorization COVID vaccines can be mandated crosses numerous ethical lines and is unprecedented.
We're crossing lines really fast now in saying that the government believes that it's ethical to require people to accept an experimental product that's not yet licensed. And I don't recall that ever happening before, and it's explicitly forbidden in this long trail of consensus in Western democracies about the ethics of medical research. But the government here in the States appears to feel like it's justified, and I sure hope they're right.
Malone has argued that the way the EUA COVID vaccines have been advertised and mandated violates the common rule in the Code of Federal Regulations, which states there must be full and complete disclosure of risks in plain language, informed consent, and no forms of coercion before taking an EUA product. However, there is some gray area when it comes to whether the common rule applies to the FDA because of a clause that's in the recently enacted Century Cures Act. But Malone says he expects this will be legally challenged and end up in the Supreme Court.
I guarantee that this is going to go to the Supreme Court because there's many other aspects of federal law that contradict those clauses. And what we're saying, let's just all be clear on this, whatever the fancy language is, the U.S. government is asserting that they can disregard the Nuremberg Code, the Helsinki Accords, the Belmont Report, the Common Rule, because all of those relate to medical research in experimental products. So to say the FDA is somehow immunized against comporting with these fundamental Western principles about medical research ethics strikes me as bizarre. And I suspect that it is not going to withstand Supreme Court scrutiny. But the problem is that getting to that point with those entities that are preparing to challenge these decisions is going to take time.
He also says mandating EUA vaccines could violate the Ninth Amendment, which the Supreme Court has found includes the right to make important decisions about one's health care or body. A group of healthcare workers from Houston Methodist Hospital have appealed their case over vaccine mandates. It could become an important test case in a mostly untested area of law. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
A stream of thousands of migrants crossing the Rio Grande River into the U.S. has forced Border Patrol to set up proxy points of entry. Then they're released into the country and told to report to local ICE offices, but most don't. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more on this and how the U.S. is releasing illegal immigrants who are COVID positive.
Migrants are traveling to the Mexican border city of Acuña by bus. Some of the Monterrey bus lines exist specifically for migrant flow and aren't the same as regular buses. Then migrants leave the city of Acuña and take a taxi to the Rio Grande River. It's a rocky but well-worn path that leads down to the banks. Many of them first pause to shed a tear and then they get rid of their passports. That's because they're told they're less likely to be deported from the United States if they don't bring an ID. The migrants wade through the water, which is waist high and then becomes about ankle deep. It's the last obstacle before they reach the United States, which one Haitian calls Disneyland. Once they reach U.S. soil, the migrants change out of their wet clothing, then they walk about a mile to the border fence, and there they wait for Border Patrol. These thousands of illegal immigrants have caused Border Patrol to set up what are known as proxy points of entry. They consist of tents to provide shade and water. There, a lot of the family units will be processed and released and told to report to their local ICE enforcement within 60 days after arriving at their destination. yet most of the single males are sent back to Mexico. According to Axios, about 50,000 illegal immigrants have now been released into the country without a court date. Only 13% have shown up to the local ICE offices, according to the outlet. And 27% of unaccompanied migrant children at the Rio Grande Valley sector removed from the U.S. have reportedly tested positive for COVID. What's more, the U.S. is releasing illegal immigrants who are COVID positive. That's according to Texas police, who approached a family at a restaurant. The family said authorities released them because they had COVID. A Christian charity put them up in a hotel that was later found to have been fully booked to house immigrants. According to one Texas police sergeant, everyone staying at the hotel is infected with the virus. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
The Biden administration put out a new plan today vowing to create a fair, orderly, and humane immigration system. But it's being met with pushback from some Democrats and Republicans.
Biden's new blueprint for the country's immigration system outlines next steps for federal agencies. It focuses on 4 areas: border management, asylum applications, collaboration with regional partners, and investing in Central America. Part of the new initiative will renew expedited removal. Those who don't qualify for asylum will be promptly sent back to their countries of origin, a move some Democrats criticized heavily. The new plan will also shift the budget from the border wall to border security measures, including border technology and modernizing land ports of entry. It also urges Congress to pass the U.S. Citizenship Act and the Dream and Promise Act through reconciliation or other means. The Biden administration has been struggling with an influx of illegal immigrants since inauguration. Axios reported Tuesday that about 50,000 migrants who illegally crossed the southern border between March and July were released into the U.S. without a court date.
And today, President Biden spoke to a group of workers at a Mack truck facility in Pennsylvania. He stressed the importance of buying American-made products. NTD's Steve Lance has the details.
The president visited Allentown, Pennsylvania today, where he spoke to a group of union workers about American manufacturing and importance of bringing supply chains back to the U.S.
In case you haven't noticed, not only you, but Ford Motor Company said they're going to have to stop producing certain vehicles. They couldn't get the chips, couldn't get the wafers. And so I'm directing my budget office to create new rules for critical products where we know we need stronger, more resilient domestic supply chains.
President Biden announced that he is tightening up the requirement for products being able to qualify to have the Made in the USA label. Currently, only 55% of a product needs to be made in the U.S. to be categorized as Made in the USA. Biden says that he will be changing this to 75%. Biden also says that he will be implementing stricter guidelines for scrutinizing in order to make sure that products are actually meeting the 75% threshold.
The president referred to his Build Back Better slogan and talked about the importance of bringing semiconductor manufacturing back to the United States.
That's why we're investing $50 billion to have the best chip manufacturing in the world come and build factories in the United States of America.
President Biden said that the strength of American manufacturing is a key component in the battle between democracy and authoritarianism.
Autocracies will not succeed if we do what we can do as a democracy. Democracies. And if you notice, not a joke, a lot of the rest of the world is hedging their bets, whether to move toward autocracy or stay with democracies.
Just before his speech in Allentown, Pennsylvania today, President Biden said that he had received a call and was notified that a bipartisan infrastructure deal had been reached with a group of bipartisan senators. There is still a lot to be figured out before a bill could get passed, but we'll be sure to keep an eye on it and give you the latest. Steve Lance, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
Democrat and Republican senators are expected to start debate on a new infrastructure agreement tonight. This is the second time they're voting on the bipartisan bill. More Republicans are now supporting the plan, but some senators warn of inflation issues. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more from Capitol Hill.
The Senate right now is working to pass trillions of dollars in new spending, and more Republicans have come on board with the $1.2 trillion hard infrastructure plan. The Senate could start debate on that as early as Wednesday evening. Senate Leader Schumer is now teeing up a vote to kick off debate on that. And while Republicans are saying they do support the hard infrastructure deal, they're also sounding the alarm on inflation and warning against the consequences of another $3.5 trillion human infrastructure plan that seems to be tied to the hip of the hard infrastructure package.
The official details haven't been released just yet, but the bipartisan infrastructure package includes around $550 billion in new spending for highways, bridges, transit, and water systems. And there's around $65 billion for broadband deployment.
That's the sort of stuff that we need to get done here. And the Democrats, if they move forward with a spending bill, need to be honest about what their priorities are and what the likely consequences will be.
Since the start of the pandemic, the number of dollars in circulation has grown by 30%. That's an unprecedented inflation of the money supply. Wealth among U.S. billionaires jumped 39% since the pandemic began, while Americans who don't own stocks or property are left with higher prices.
At the very top of the economic ladder, you've got a small handful who are sufficiently wealthy and well-connected and anticipating the way the government's going to spend. They might actually get more wealthy off of spending $4 trillion at a time.
That's because the Federal Reserve's bond purchasing programs injects money into the financial system, which economists say inflates things like the stock market and real estate market. Economists say if the Federal Reserve stops injecting money into the financial system, inflation could slow down. But the Federal Reserve hasn't committed to doing that anytime soon.
The hands-off approach is allowing it to percolate up to the consumer level.
They could stop this crisis with policy. They could stop borrowing money.
Senator Rick Scott proposes two solutions to start combating inflation. First, he wants to require all committees to submit an inflation impact statement for their bills.
We're going to let people know exactly what it's going to impact, how it's going to impact inflation.
And he wants to pass a bill to require a 2/3 vote in the Senate to pass any bill that will increase deficit spending.
And Senator Rick Scott tells us he's against the government implementing price controls to get inflation under control. His view on it is that it will naturally go down once voters are impacted by these price rises and vote out lawmakers who are adding fuel to the inflation flame. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
At least 2 people were killed and dozens injured after an acetic acid leak at a plant near LaPorte, Texas. The cause of the leak is unknown and the investigation is still ongoing. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
The incident occurred on Tuesday evening at the facility, releasing roughly 100,000 pounds of a mixture that included acetic acid. So far, 2 people have died. A spokeswoman for the Harris County Fire Marshal's office also said 35 people suffered minor symptoms. 5 were hospitalized with more serious symptoms, and 2 were in critical condition. The LaPorte Office of Emergency Management tweeted, "The leak has been isolated, and air monitoring at the facility perimeter indicates no off-site impact. There is no shelter in place or other protective actions being recommended at this time." The investigation into what caused the leak is ongoing, but the fire marshal's office said in a tweet that there was no explosion or fire at the facility. The site is still being decontaminated before personnel can enter parts of the facility to continue the investigation. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Texas voters have just chosen a new congressman. 2 Republicans competed for the vacant seat, one with an endorsement from Donald Trump. NTD's Allison Lee has that story.
Republican Jake Elzy will be representing Texas's 6th congressional district. He beat fellow Republican Susan Wright in a special runoff election on Tuesday with the 53% of the vote.
What I'm worried about now is in the next few days, taking the oath of office in Washington, D.C. and doing the work for the people of the 6th District of Texas.
The seat was left vacant when Susan Wright's late husband, Congressman Ron Wright, died of cancer in February. Former President Trump had endorsed Susan Wright. Before the election, Trump said she supports America First policies. Susan has my complete and total endorsement.
Endorsements are great. I had Rick Perry, I had Dan Crenshaw, Marcus and Morgan Luttrell, our local leaders, and a serious number of state representatives. So all endorsements are great. She should be grateful for the endorsement of President Trump.
Fewer than 40,000 people voted in the election, a low turnout in a district with a population of over 800,000. There were 23 candidates in the first round of voting back in May, and no Democrat made it to the runoff.
I often say that I'm a Reagan Republican. I have the bright view for our country, that morning is on its way, and then let's restore the beauty and the greatness of this country as a United States of America.
Once LZ is sworn in, there will be 220 Democrats, 212 Republicans, and 3 vacancies in the House. Allison Lee, NTD News.
More data on the unintended consequences of pandemic lockdowns and remote learning. A new report indicates that elementary school students fell 4 to 5 months behind in math and reading during the past school year. Here are the details.
Data has shown that remote learning takes a toll on both mental and physical health. Now, a new report from McKinsey & Company shows the impact on children's education. According to the report, elementary school students in the U.S. fell behind an average of 5 months in math and 4 months in reading during this past school year. The company used data from nearly every state to compare student performance in the spring of 2021 with performance before the pandemic. The report found that during the final months of this past school year, which had been moved entirely online in nearly every state, students learned almost no new math. During the same period, students' reading performance was better, but still slow compared to the year before. The report says the drop in performance was due to students facing a range of issues, including shifting schedules, changing teachers mid-year, internet connection problems, and online fatigue. And the impact of pandemic lockdowns goes beyond academic performance. The Department of Education said in a report last month that during the pandemic, students suffered from grief, isolation, and uncertainty. This has been linked to a jump in suicides among some school-aged children. To avoid further harm to children's education and well-being, parents around the country are pushing for full in-person learning in the upcoming school year.
Up next, New York City has several major airports, but none in the heart of the city. But there is a way you can get a direct flight to and from Midtown Manhattan. And digital security is a widespread problem these days. We bring you a trick from an expert to help you keep the data on your phone safe. More in just a moment on NTD News. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced Wednesday that New York City will sweeten the pot by offering $100 to any city resident who gets a first dose of the CCP virus vaccine at a city-run site. New York City and the state have already offered vaccination incentives, including lottery tickets, scholarships, free subway rides, and complimentary tickets to museums, sports games, and other attractions. Other locales, including the state of New Mexico and the city of Gadsden, Alabama, also have offered $100 cash payments. Others have offered a more limited version. Ohio is offering $100 gift cards to Medicaid members who get inoculated, and West Virginia is providing $100 savings bonds to 16 to 35-year-olds who do so. And President Biden is considering requiring federal employees to show proof of vaccination or submit to regular testing and wear a mask. And New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced Wednesday that he would mandate all state employees either get vaccinated or get regularly tested. And travel time from New York City to Boston can now be cut in half. This thanks to planes that provide a direct flight from Manhattan to Boston. NTD's Arian Pazdar has that story.
Manhattan doesn't have an airport, but it's surrounded by water. That's where seaplanes come in. This Boston-bound plane takes off from Midtown Manhattan just 10 minutes from Times Square. It provides beautiful views over the city's landmarks like Central Park and the Statue of Liberty. But most people don't go on the flight for the views.
We're targeting business travelers. We think it's most well-timed for business meetings.
Getting to Boston from the Big Apple by car or train takes around 3 hours.
We're promising to get people, from the middle of New York to the middle of Boston in less than an hour and a half.
Unlike huge sprawling airports, the seaplane facility is rather small, so passengers can arrive as little as 10 minutes before departure time. But the convenient seaplane is kind of a fair weather friend.
Seaplanes can be more impacted by weather.
He added that passengers get regular updates on possible flight cancellations. The company has been operating flights to other locations like the Hamptons in eastern Long Island and Bridgeport, Connecticut. Seaplanes don't have to land on water. They've also got tires, which allows them to land on a conventional runway as well. The company plans to expand operations to more cities in the Northeast. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
In Tokyo, the Olympic Committee recognizes the importance of mental health after superstar Simone Biles doesn't compete. And U.S. swimmer Katie Ledecky wins another gold medal. Here are the details.
Gymnast Simone Biles withdrew from the individual competition on Wednesday. It's the second event she withdrew from due to mental health issues this week. A spokesman for the Olympic Committee said the organizers do take mental health seriously in the Olympic Village.
It's an incredibly important issue and one that's really finally come to the fore. Are we doing enough? I hope so. I think so. But like everyone in the world, we can do more.
Swimmer Katie Ledecky impressed fans and won her first gold medal of the Tokyo Olympics. In total, it's her sixth gold medal after participating at Olympic events for a decade. Ledecky sometimes attributes her wins to her secret ingredient, chocolate milk. She has said she regularly drinks it between workouts to recover because it has the right amount of carbs and proteins. Ledecky even swam across a pool with a glass of chocolate milk on her head. The glass didn't seem to move, and she didn't spill a single drop as she crossed the pool. She brought it safely to the other side and then, of course, took a sip right away. And while the typhoon that was heading towards Tokyo hasn't impacted the games too much, the extreme heat and humidity are interfering with events. Tennis games scheduled for Thursday are moved to a later time, and more games might be postponed. Athletes are finding various ways to keep themselves cool.
Damp towels that are filled with 3 kilograms of crushed ice, and then they're taped off at the end and in the middle to stop it moving around. Then they place them around their neck, and that provides a really strong, conductive cooling stimulus.
The venue also has water sprinklers installed in order to keep people as cool as possible.
Coming up, California's governor approved legislation that will expand the state's health care services and spendings. The state will be the first to offer medical health services to illegal immigrants. And the California university system currently employs over 500,000 faculty and staff. All of them will need to be vaccinated to get into campus this coming fall. That and more on NTD News.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
California will now allow illegal immigrants to enroll in medical health services. The Governor, Gavin Newsom, approved of a bill that will expand the coverage. Here's NTD's Cynthia Kai with more.
California is now the first state to offer Medi-Cal to illegal immigrants age 50 and over. Medi-Cal is California's Medicaid health care program. Governor Gavin Newsom approved the initiative during a press conference in Fresno on July 27th.
Roughly 250,000 people are eligible for coverage. We estimate at the moment about 235,000 individuals will be direct beneficiaries of preventative care, direct beneficiaries of long-term care, direct beneficiaries of in-home supportive services and the care that IHSS provides.
In 2019, California was the first state to extend Medi-Cal coverage to all eligible illegal immigrants aged 26 and younger. Now, those 50 years and older are eligible for these health services.
Regardless, again, of their ability to pay, regardless of their pre-existing conditions, and regardless of their immigration status.
The initiative is part of Assembly Bill 133, which includes a number of other spending measures for mental health, behavioral health, housing, and other health-related social needs. Newsom said the implementation of the bill is a gradual process spanning a number of years. But some Californians disagree with Newsom's policies and spendings.
We want a governor who make us better, not make us worse, who use properly, wisely our tax money. We are taxpayers. Our tax money has to be used properly with our consent.
He just gets to choose what's essential and what's non-essential based on his pure opinions, based on what the party thinks. He doesn't care about the Californians. He doesn't care about the homelessness. He doesn't care about the fires.
Newsom said that Assembly Bill 133 is the final bill signed under the current state budget. He faces a recall election on September 14th. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
The National Security Agency is offering a simple but effective approach to prevent hackers from breaking into your mobile device. That is step 1, turn off your phone, and step 2, turn it back on. Here's more.
You can stop hacking by simply rebooting your phone every week. So said the National Security Agency's Best Practices Guide for Mobile Device Security. According to an expert from the NSA's Cybersecurity Directorate, the simple action makes even the most sophisticated hackers work harder to maintain access.
A lot of modern cyber attacks are a chain of 2, 3, or even more vulnerabilities in a row that have to be successfully exploited. And if you can reset the adversary back to the beginning of that chain and force them to go through the whole thing again, that's also an aspect of incurring cost on them.
Always in arm's reach and rarely turned off, cell phones have become top targets for hackers. They're able to steal personal data, secretly turn on cameras and microphones, and even track the user's locations.
Your phone knows where it is on the earth, and it will, under many circumstances, share that information with external parties.
Usually, once the hacker gains access to the system, they'll look for a way to stay in by installing malicious software into the device's root file system. But that's getting more difficult as phone manufacturers like Apple and Google add in strong security features to block malware from core operating systems.
Just be careful which apps you install. Right? Install the ones you need. When you're done with one, you're not going to use it anymore. Uninstall it, because by doing that, you keep your attack surface more bounded.
The NSA's guide also acknowledges that rebooting only works some of the time and offers an even simpler solution. Don't carry the phone with you.
Students and staff planning to enter any California State University campus may need to be vaccinated. The CSU system announced it for the upcoming fall season. NTD's David Lamb reports.
On Tuesday, the CSU system said it will require students, faculty, and staff to be vaccinated against COVID-19 or the CCP virus in order to access its on-campus facilities.
The CSU system, along with the University of California system, previously decided in April to wait until one of the vaccines was fully FDA approved. But with the next academic school year coming, and according to the press release, new cases regarding the Delta variant prompted the system to move forward without waiting for the FDA. The CSU system is the largest public four-year higher education system in the country. It has over 500,000 students and faculty and over 23 campuses. Under the CSU's vaccination policy, students and staff will have to verify their vaccination status. The date may vary depending on the campus, but certifications are required no later than September 30th. Students and staff may seek medical and religious exemptions.
Now, for students who don't plan on coming to campus, the system expects most campuses to offer more virtual courses. The final policy is expected to be released in the coming days. David Lam, NTD News, California.
Coming up, more information is surfacing about the flood casualties in China's central city. A 15-year-old tells her story of being trapped in a subway car. And an insider from an insurance company shed some light on questions surrounding the flood. How many subway cars were submerged in water? And why are the windows covered up in black? Find out more here on NTD News. A 15-year-old survivor gives an account of her experience in the flooded subway in Henan, China, where she was trapped alongside dead bodies. And new information is circulating on Chinese social media that there could be as many as 90 subway cars submerged in the flood. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
A 15-year-old survivor is opening up after escaping a deadly subway car incident. In a self-recorded video, she explains. That's after she and her parents got trapped inside a flooded subway train car in China's Zhengzhou city along the Metro Line 5 route last Tuesday. They were inside the last carriage, the hardest hit by floodwaters. A video circulating online shows the scene, with riders gasping for air inside the sealed subway car. The survivor says the severe lack of oxygen inside knocked out many of the passengers. She recounts.
这次事故死了很多人，死了10几个人，都是一个一个亲眼看到的。大家死亡的原因都是缺氧，严重缺氧。
Video clips show the water rose to the passengers' necks. Many of them were seen calling to their families to say goodbye. One victim was nearby the young survivor at the time. The woman called her mother, gave her the family bank card password, and passed away not long after. The survivor recalls severe pain in her chest and says she wasn't able to breathe. Her father also went into shock several times and lost consciousness. What's more, she later learned from fellow riders that authorities had announced that all trapped passengers had been safely evacuated. The news shocked her. Pointing out the irony, she witnessed the passengers around her suffocate. Yet the masses were being told they had all been rescued. Official reports released while the riders were still trapped read, "At present, the trapped passengers have been evacuated safely." The young survivor points out that after she was rescued, she saw many people lying on the train platform, noting, "I think most of them are dead." The accident's official death toll now stands at 14. Before the disaster, Chinese authorities are suspected of releasing floodwaters to lessen pressure on upstream reservoirs. That came amid heavy rainfall in central China. But the immense water flow inundated the Zhengzhou subway line. The city is home to 5 million people. As videos spread online following the subway flood disaster, one unusual clip is drawing attention. It captures survivors as they recount the horrors of being trapped inside the flooded train cars. But in the video, someone seemingly tried to stop them from detailing what they went through. A man there suddenly interrupted the conversation. The survivors left the scene before answering the final question. Where are the flooded subway cars in Zhengzhou? On Monday, local residents spotted at least 4 trains being dragged out and transported elsewhere. The windows were all covered with black cloth. And a day later, the subway cars were spotted on a highway. A netizen took a close-up. All the openings in the windows were covered with black cloth. Even the numbers on each door were covered. The destination, unknown. Some netizens question what are the authorities covering up and how many subway cars were submerged in water. Chinese authorities did not publish any figures. But a netizen on Chinese social media Weibo wrote one of his friends works at a local insurance company, and he told him that a total of 91 subway cars have been soaked, and his company has to pay at least $600 million in compensation. New evidence emerges surrounding China's flood disasters. Some claim Chinese authorities sent the military to destroy local river embankments designed to block floodwaters.
部队这些人承认了，他们来到这儿才知道是来炸河堤的，他们干了这些人，他们承认了来这儿炸河堤的。
Videos circulating online appear to show soldiers in Henan Province's Xinxiang city caught by locals in the middle of the night. The video comes after a local river overflowed last week. Because of water released from a reservoir upstream, the flooding has not yet receded. Water levels are still rising in the city, and more rainfall is expected in the coming days.
The UK needs to be wary about its relations with China and should avoid becoming economically dependent on Beijing. That's according to Tony Abbott, former Australian Prime Minister and now a trade advisor to the UK government. NTD's David English has more.
Board of Trade member Tony Abbott has warned the UK of handing Beijing too much power. Speaking at the Policy Exchange think tank, Abbott says China is weaponizing trade and behaving aggressively in a new Cold War.
After 40 years of bide and hide, China is asserting itself aggressively in what's at best a cold peace and more likely a new Cold War, only against a strategic competitor that's far more formidable than the old Soviet Union because it's been increasingly embedded inside the global economy and can bring economic as well as military pressure to bear against its targets.
Abbott says China is likely to be the challenge of the century for the West. He said the UK should be much more careful about becoming economically dependent on Beijing as the regime sees trade as a strategic weapon. Abbott was Australian Prime Minister from 2013 to 2015 and was appointed last year as an advisor to the UK's Board of Trade.
As Australia has found, the Beijing government sees trade as a strategic weapon to be turned on and off like a tap, to reward friends and to punish foes. In my judgment, it should be every business's concern to minimise the critical place that Chinese intermediate goods might have in our supply chains, lest they be denied just when they're needed most.
The intervention comes as Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces growing pressure from some Conservative backbenchers to cool links with Beijing amid security concerns. The UK government has already decided to strip Chinese technology giant Huawei from the domestic 5G network. International Trade Secretary Liz Truss said she did not think there was full transparency when it came to the dealings with the Chinese regime.
Well, as I've said, I believe that there are currently practices going on, particularly in global trade, that need to be challenged.
The Prime Minister has also asked National Security Advisor Sir Stephen Lovegrove to examine the potential sale of Welsh microchip manufacturer Newport Wafer Fab to Chinese company Nexperia. Abbott said it would be unwise to sell UK technology firms that aid China's interests. He says he's not advocating a retreat from free trade, but the West should be wary of regimes that see business as politics by other means. David English, NTD News.
Still to come, Sydney, Australia adds 4 more weeks of lockdown while the government threatens stronger enforcement of the rules. Find out what residents are saying about it. And a newly opened tourist attraction in London's Marble Arch is already offering refunds to dissatisfied tourists. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm gonna pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
Australia's biggest city, Sydney, extended a lockdown by 4 weeks today. That's after an already protracted stay-at-home order failed to douse a COVID-19 outbreak. Authorities are also warning of tougher policing to stamp out non-compliance.
The country's most populous state, New South Wales, reported 177 new cases for Tuesday. At least 46 of those new cases were people active in the community before being diagnosed, raising the likelihood of transmission. New South Wales State Premier Gladys Berejiklian warned of tougher policing to stamp out non-compliance and added that police would boost enforcement of wide-ranging social distancing rules. In Sydney's southwest, reactions to the lockdown extension were mixed.
It's all right, but it's a bit hard for everybody else, and that, but Gladys is doing a good job. She is.
There's a lot of people out there that have lost their jobs and, paying off houses, paying off a lot of things, and to just, say, what, let's extend it a month. Cases are always going to be going up and down, but there's got to be other ways.
The extension turns what was initially intended to be a snap lockdown into one of the country's longest since the start of the pandemic, and may spark the second recession in 2 years, according to economists.
And a group of concerned journalists in the UK say views critical of the official COVID-19 narrative have been censored in the mass media. They say the public are only given one scientific truth. Many of the journalists want to remain anonymous, but we interviewed two who were willing to speak. NTD's Jane Werrell brings us this report.
Almost 30 journalists have come together to counter what they say is censorship of views critical to the official COVID-19 narrative. They say the censorship has taken different forms and the public has the right to know the truth.
My main concern with the censorship is that the public are not being well informed. They don't, even to do with the vaccines, they're not getting informed consent. Informed consent is you need to know all the risks involved. That has been completely downplayed. So they're only hearing one version of the truth, the one version. So that's very dangerous. Also, fear-mongering has been going on with the mainstream media. Now, if you look at the early minutes of the SAGE meeting done in the UK around March 2020, there was actually, they did a table of the key points they wanted to address and use media to increase sense of personal threat was highlighted as a tool that they need to do. So this has already, it's almost like a psychological warfare has been unleashed and the mainstream media has done its, they're doing its bidding.
Among the group of journalists, which is called Holding the Line, Journalists Against COVID Censorship, is former BBC journalist Tony Gosling. He says one of the scandals is the failure of the press to look at treatment for COVID-19.
Well, when we're talking about censorship, this is not a light term to use. Ivermectin, chloroquine, vitamin D, zinc have all been censored. We haven't seen any kind of pushing and promotion of this in the mass media, apart from a tiny bit in the Daily Mail, at all. And as a result, we've seen potentially tens of thousands of people die unnecessarily. And that's why this is such a serious issue.
I know that some people want to remain anonymous. So can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, there's very good reasons why people have to remain anonymous. If anyone knows how journalism works nowadays, we've got official guidance now at the BBC, which is saying that people are not allowed to express their views outside the corporation. And if they do, it can be a sackable offence. Now, that's fairly new. And certainly in the old days, and in traditional free journalism, journalists can express their views whenever they wish, and they don't necessarily have to face any kind of disciplinary or sacking. I think if you were to publicly have a go at your boss, for example, that's one thing. But if you're just saying things like, well, I don't think I'm going to have this vaccine and this is why, then why is that a sackable offence? If you go along to a rally as an interested person to see what's going on, why is that a sackable offence? Of course it shouldn't be, but they are becoming sackable offences.
But Fiona Fox of the Science Media Centre was quoted in the Press Gazette as saying, "There are lots of issues that the media hasn't, I don't think, informed the public well about, but on COVID, I think they have." The Science Media Centre weren't able to speak to NTD before deadline. The trade body News Media Association that campaigns for press freedom and freedom of expression didn't respond in time for deadline. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
A new temporary London attraction that opened this week is under fire for not being finished and is offering refunds. Westminster Council commissioned the Marble Arch Mound and says elements of the site are not ready for visitors. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us this report from Marble Arch.
Construction started on the £2 million Marble Arch Mound in April, and it was originally scheduled to open on June 21st, the former so-called Freedom Day. But it missed the deadline, and it finally opened this week with teething problems. The 25-metre-high Marble Arch Mound is located on the corner of Hyde Park and is a part of a wider £150 million programme of public area improvements. It was planned by Dutch architect company MVRDV and is designed so that once visitors ascend the winding 134 steps, they are met with unique views of the capital's Oxford Street, Hyde Park, Mayfair and Marylebone. Lockdowns have hit retail in the area and some units have had to close. The local authority hope the mound will entice people to visit location and do some in-person shopping rather than shop online. In the heart of the mound, a hollowed-out space will be used as a cafe, shop and exhibition space. However, the lush green and inviting projected design is somewhat lacking at the current moment. We asked passers-by their impressions of it.
I was really optimistic about it at the start because I thought it would be a nice draw card, but it's turned out to be a little bit of a letdown, actually. I thought it was going to be a lot better.
He thinks it won't attract people how it is.
There's a busking pitch right there. I think that would be a better draw card, but essentially it's been wiped out by this thing. So they've taken away what could be live grassroots entertainment and replaced it with just a grass pile.
This lady has been out of the UK for 2 years and didn't know about the mound.
Knowing now that it's a viewpoint over the park, I think it's great. Hyde Park is absolutely gorgeous, and if you can get a view from it from above, I think why not?
And about the £2 million price tag.
I mean, I don't know what's inside, but I think anything that gets you to view London from a different angle has to be a good thing.
This gentleman was taken with the design.
Well, it's definitely striking. I think artistically it's interesting with the geometric shapes, but it's looking a bit bare at the moment. I think if they'd left it a while and they created a bit more interest with the bushes and the trees, it might be a bit more appealing. And I do think it overshadows the Marble Arch a bit, which kind of defeats the object of attracting people to the area.
Visiting the mound costs between £4.50 and £8. Westminster Council has said those visiting over the rest of the week will be offered a refund and a free return ticket so they can see the mound at its best. The mound will be open until January 2022. Westminster Council say they are sorry for the delay and working hard to resolve things over the next few days. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, London.
The slate landscape of northwest Wales has joined the likes of the Taj Mahal, the Egyptian pyramids and the Grand Canyon to become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is the UK's 32nd site on the prestigious list. NTD's Eddie Aitken has more on this.
The Welsh Slate landscape was granted the World Heritage status at a meeting of the World Heritage Committee on Wednesday. It becomes the UK's 32nd UNESCO World Heritage Site and the fourth in Wales. Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford said he was thrilled by the news. He said this is a time to celebrate Slate, its history and its strong future. Slate has been quarried in the area for more than 1,800 years, but it was not until the Industrial Revolution that demand surged as cities across the world expanded. Slate from the mines at Gwynedd were widely used to roof workers' homes, public buildings, places of worship and factories. By the 1890s, the Welsh slate industry employed 17,000 workers and produced almost 500,000 tonnes of slate a year, around a third of all roofing slate used in the world at that time. Earlier this week, the city of Bath, which was originally included in the World Heritage List in 1987, was awarded a dual designation as part of the Great Spas of Europe. But last week, Liverpool was stripped of its World Heritage status because developments, including the new Everton Stadium, were thought to pose a threat to its heritage value. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.